Okay. Right, good evening everybody. Welcome to the virtual meeting of Ryedale District Council Planning Committee. Today, Tuesday the 19th of January at 6 o'clock. Can I ask members, first of all, if you're not speaking, to please mute your microphones to avoid background interference, and when it's your turn to speak, I will invite you to speak, so no one will be missed out. Do we have item 1 on the agenda? Do we have any apologies for absence? And I'm assuming because everybody's here, we haven't.
Yeah, no apologies have been received.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. Do we have any declarations of interest, please, members?
Councillor Goodrick, just before we go to that, I can see that Councillor Andrews has arrived.
Thank you.
So I think we're just missing currently Councillor Bailey. Yeah. And obviously there will be various members who need to now mute, but I think we're just missing Councillor Bailey at the moment.
Okay. Right, I've got 3 hands up, so can I come to you first, please, Councillor Andrews?
Yes, can you hear me, Chair?
Yes.
In regard to item number 8, Chair, I'm a member of Moulton Town Council and was present when this matter was discussed at Moulton Town Council. Personal, not prejudicial.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've been lobbied on item 7, the Hutton Zambo application, by email. It is personal, non-prejudicial, non-pecuniary.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. And Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chair. Agenda item 8, personal, non-financial. The Elam Ryedale Church is one of those objecting to this application. I am a member and an officer of that church.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Anybody else? If I could ask you to lower your hands so that we don't have legacy hands on screen, and then I'll pick up if you need to speak going forward. Thank you very much, members. Minutes.
And I think Councillor Andrews needs to mute.
Ah, right. Okay. Councillor Andrews, could you mute your microphone as well, please? That's kind. Thank you very much. Minutes of the planning meeting held on the 8th of December. Does anybody have any issues with those minutes? Right. So on the basis that no one has any issues, can I have a proposer and seconder? And thank you, Councillor Mason and Councillor Cleary. Can I ask if anybody is not happy with those minutes to show now, on the basis that if everybody is, I will accept that as going forward? Right. On the basis that no one's indicated that they've got any queries, we'll accept those minutes. And then the next item on the agenda is item 4, which is the minutes from the meeting held on the 15th of December. Again, I'm going to ask if anybody is unhappy with any of those minutes, and if I can have a proposer and seconder for those minutes, if you are all happy with them. Councillor Cleary, thank you. And Councillor Potter, thank you. Does anybody have any objections to those minutes that would mean that they would refuse them? Otherwise, I'll take them as accepted. Okay, thank you very much, members. We'll accept those minutes of that meeting. So thank you for that. Item 5 on the agenda is urgent business, and I don't have any. So we'll go straight to the schedule of items to be determined, which is on page 8, which is 2 items. And we'll go straight to item number 7, which is 20000967 house, and that's 5 Worldview, Village Street, High Hutton. And I believe it's Ellie Thompson that's going to present on this. Thanks, Ellie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Members, this is a relatively minor part retrospective application for a part 2-storey, part single-storey rear and side extension, together with the formation of a new parking area on land to the front of the dwelling. The current proposed extension represents a significant reduction in what was originally proposed. The application site is a 20th century semi-detached property located off Back Lane in High Hutton. The site is closely associated with the properties to the northwest, which are located at the eastern end of Village Street. The site sits back from the highway behind an area of land which was previously used as allotment land. A car parking area for the application site has since been partially constructed on this area of land, which is now also subject to this revised application. Members will note from the site layout plan that this site has an unusual shape in that it doglegs slightly away from the side elevation of the main dwelling to the north. As a result, the domestic curtilage of the site runs along the rear boundaries of the neighbouring properties to the northwest on Village Street. The proposed extensions have been designed to better connect the property to this unusually shaped rear garden. It is considered that the proposed extensions represent proportionate additions to an existing property within the locality and the AONB. As members will see from the report, there have been 2 neighbour objections to the scheme from the occupiers of number 4 and number 3 Woldview. The Parish Council and the AONB manager have also objected, but members should be aware that the Parish Council's latest objection maintains a reference or objection to elements of the earlier original scheme. These comments and objections, including concerns over the size and scale of the development and impact on a neighbouring amenity, are detailed and considered within the officer's report. The occupiers of the attached neighbouring property number 6 Woldview have not objected, and the local highway authority has raised no objections. All of the issues are outlined in the report, and it is considered that the proposed extensions and parking area are acceptable. If I could quickly draw members' attentions to the late pages, where they'll see the AONB manager's latest consultation response, which includes his comments on the proposed parking area. Since the late pages were published, we have also had further responses from the occupiers of number 4 Woldview, and they have asked me to read their further views to you, which I'll do now. So, for the attention of RDC Planning Committee meeting 19th of January 2021, it seems that the above application to extend the property at 5 Woldview and create a car park may be approved with conditions by the Planning Committee at its virtual meeting on the 19th of January 2021. We recognise that RDC's planning and development management teams have gone to some length to integrate a wide range of consultation responses into its appraisal of and recommendations for this application. However, we do still wish it to be known that we still do object to this application on the grounds previously stated. We will unfortunately not be able to attend the meeting, but wish it to be known to all those present that we do object, most specifically to the scale of the side extension. We would ask that 2 relatively minor additions be made to the recommendations for this application regarding hedging at the site. Number 1, we ask the Planning Committee to stipulate that a new hedge line be planted, cultivated and maintained along the post and rail fence across the car park at A on the diagram below. This need only be of inexpensive native species which match those against Back Lane. This has also been recommended by the AONB manager. The new hedge would reduce the visibility of the road from the back of Woldview and vice versa. It would also go some way to replanting the hedge length destroyed by the summary creation of the car park in 2020. Number 2, we ask the Planning Committee to stipulate that the existing hedge line at B on the diagram below be protected from any damage during all building works relating to this application. This hedge line is cultivated on the land at 4 Wold View and is owned by us. It is the barrier which exists on our side of the boundary. It must be protected from any erection of new fences, foundation works, scaffolding, etc. With regards to the recommendation that the car park be used solely for domestic use and not used as a builder's yard, we ask how this will be enforced, monitored in the future. We also request that the homeowner does not erect any additional CCTV on the side extension for the sake of our privacy. As we work from home, as do our neighbours at number 3, and there are 2 immediate neighbours with children studying at home, we feel it would be sensitive of the applicant to not begin works until the end of lockdown and request that this be a condition. For members' information, the diagram referred to in that letter is the site layout plan and relates to the boundary between the car park area and the remaining allotment land and the rear garden hedge of number 4 Wold View. The second letter from the same objector from number 4 Wold View is as follows. Having further considered the revised application, we, like our neighbours, urge the Planning Committee to make a further site visit to review the impact on our privacy from the point of view of the new plans. We would very much welcome that this site visit include a visit to our garden to see firsthand, particularly how the side extension and new windows impact on our right to privacy. We reiterate that there are currently no buildings at the back of our property, and the elevated position of our property over number 5 further exacerbates the loss of privacy. All of the houses on our street have been built at slightly different angles to ensure absolute privacy, and we request that this forward-thinking planning not be destroyed by one property's need to expand unreasonably towards our property and within our sightline from our kitchen. A more imaginative approach would be to further reduce the size of the side extension and angle the patio doors to a degree which avoids overlooking neighbouring properties. We would like to draw further attention to the fact that number 6 is newly occupied by tenants from Yorkshire Housing Association, and this may be why there has been no objection from there. We don't think it is acceptable for us to grow a 6-foot high hedge taller in order to avoid seeing the new side extension, which would also block our light and beautiful view over the Yorkshire Wolds, which our property address draws attention to. We urge the Planning Committee to revisit the site and give permission to access our garden at any convenient time. We are also aware of a further response letter from the occupiers of number 3 Wold View, which was sent to Councillors Goodrick and Councillor Cleary. The objector hasn't asked for this to be read out, but for the benefit of other members, I will just quickly summarise the main points of that letter. The objector takes issue with a statement made at the top of page 16 within the officer's report, and is of the opinion that the proposed development would afford uninterrupted views into their house from within the property's main living space, specifically from the proposed bifold doors. The objector does not object to the principle of an extension, but believes the size and orientation of the proposed patio door opening will result in a loss of privacy, and the objector does not believe this has been adequately reflected within the officer's report. The objector respectfully asks members to hold a site visit in order to judge privacy impacts of the proposal prior to determination. Should the members be minded to support the development, the objector would request the addition of a further condition to mitigate the loss of privacy, which would take the form of a screen or garden structure attached to the extension wall parallel to the rear garden boundaries. Thank you, Madam Chairman. There are no more updates, so we can now move forward to look at the photos of the site.
Thanks, Ellie.
Thank you. So this is an aerial view of the site, sort of demonstrating the orientation of the building within its plot. You'll see the area on this image still as allotment land, which is in front of the building, which has now been turned into a car parking area. and you'll also be able to see the rear garden of the property, which kind of extends towards the north, away from the side corner of the dwelling. Thanks, Ellie. Next slide, thank you. So this image is taken from the main highway back lane. You can see the application site on the right-hand side there, and the vehicular access into the new forward parking area. The existing shared parking area between number 5 and number 6 is slightly to the right, further to the right of that parking split area there. Thanks, Ellie. Next slide. So this is just another viewpoint of the parking spaces. So the car on the right, that is parked in what was the shared parking area for both properties prior to the construction of the new parking area, which you can see on the left. So really there has been much more parking created in the locality for the vehicles of these two properties. Thanks, Ellie. Next slide. This is just another viewpoint of the new parking area which is being applied for under this application. The boundary fence, which was referred to in one of the objectors' letters, where they recommended a condition, is the post and rail fence you can see at the back of the image there. That's where the AONB manager is recommending a new hedge line. Thanks, Ellie. Next slide. So this is the front view of the property taken from within the parking area. The shed on the left there doesn't belong to the applicant. I think that's within the allotment land, which I believe is owned by the estate. So from this viewpoint, with regards to the proposed extensions, you'll be able to see the sort of top half of the single-storey extension coming out from the side elevation there. Thanks, Ellie. Next slide. So this is the rear of the property, taken from within their rear garden. The two-storey element of the extension will extend out from the rear elevation of the property and won't be angled towards the garden area. It will be angled in the same way as the property, as you can see in that image. The single-storey section of the extension to the side, that will extend no further really than, if you look at the fence on the left-hand side, it won't extend any further down the garden from the top point of that fence. So it's the sort of the top corner of the garden there that will be is proposed to be developed. Thanks, Ellie. Next slide. So this image has been taken from the back of the garden, and I think it demonstrates the space between the application site and the neighbouring properties on Village Street. There is quite a significant gap between them. I suppose it also shows the orientation between the application site and the properties on Village Street and their rear gardens. Thanks, Ellie. Next slide. And this is just another viewpoint from the back of the garden, looking down towards the main dwelling. The fence that's sort of towards the right, yeah, that's the boundary fence with the neighbouring gardens there. Thanks, Elliot. Thank you. So this image is taken from the existing rear elevation of the property, looking down the garden. I think it demonstrates that there is a certain level of existing intervisibility between the application site and these neighbouring properties. The neighbouring properties on Village Street will all have quite a clear view of the application site's rear garden. So there is quite a strong existing relationship between the two sites. Thanks, Ellie. Next slide. This image has been taken from Village Street, looking towards the application site, looking past number 4 World View. So from this vantage point, because the 2-storey section of the extension is orientated to extend directly out from the rear and is set down from the ridge height, you'll see a certain level of the 2-storey extension, but due to the intervening hedges and structures, it's unlikely you'd see any of the 1-storey extension from here. So this image has been taken from the public right-of-way, which runs to the north of the application site and this sort of hamlet. So the application site is the property on the left-hand side, almost sort of directly beneath where the sun is in this image. And I think I would draw members' attention to the land levels in this image. These properties are located sort of on the top of a wold, and the land sort of falls away down towards, in landscape terms, you're on lower levels as you go down this public right of way. So from this vantage point, you would really only see a section of the 2-storey element of the extension, which would appear subservient and in the context of the existing dwelling. Okay. So this image has been taken from the rear garden of number 4 Wold View. So these properties are on slightly higher land than the application site, and I think this image does demonstrate that. It also shows that there is intervening garden buildings and an intervening hedge, which I think is about 1.8 metres high. So again, you can see the space between the two sites, but also the 1-storey element of the extension is likely to be quite well screened from existing structures and hedge line. And this image has been taken from the rear garden of number 3 Wold View, again just demonstrating the intervening hedges, structures, and as well the distance between the application site and this neighbouring property. Thank you, Chair. There are no more photos. The recommendation is as outlined in the officer's report. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Ellie. Can I just quickly, because I've omitted to declare that I've also been lobbied on item 7. So if we can just make a note, it's personal, non-prejudicial and non-pecuniary. So my apologies for that, members. We don't appear to have a speaker this evening for this item, so I will open it up to members for questions, please. Councillor Andrews.
By the way, Chair, I have a switch on my microphone, so it may appear that on the screen that I'm not muted, when in fact I've muted myself on the microphone. Just a couple of questions. First of all, did I see that in one of those pictures that number 4 World View has got an extension, and then I have another question after that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Yes, so number 4 World View does have an extension. It has a 2-storey flat roof side extension.
Thank you. My next question, I mean, a lot of these objections have asked for extra landscaping. How much of that extra landscaping do you think is justifiable? And is it actually provided by the existing conditions, or does it need an additional condition in order to cover this? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't think any of the conditions that we currently have on relate to landscaping. It's mainly because quite a lot of it has been retained already. The front hedge in front of the car parking area, that is not within the applicant's red line boundary, so they don't have control over that. The suggestion of a hedge from the A1B manager and one of the objectors to go along the sort of northwestern boundary of the car parking area. It could further sort of screen vehicles from view. You can look over the allotment area at the minute and sort of look into that site. So that could potentially be something which members might want to explore. I believe the second condition recommended by one of the objectors was in relation to protecting their own boundary hedge from building works. I would say in answer to that the single story sort of side extension is not particularly close to the boundary hedge. So I wouldn't be inclined to think that a condition would really be necessary in that regards.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you to the officer for the outstanding report. Two questions, if I may. The first relates to the hedge that fronts Back Lane that's already been mentioned, and you've Ellie, you've highlighted the fact that it's not within the red line boundary, and the diagram on page 19 clearly shows that. Do we know whose it is, and should it actually be included in the red line boundary if it does actually belong to the applicant? I'm aware that you might not know, but I wonder if it has been deliberately left out. The second question, if I may, is actually, I think, the salient question. The objector, I think, lives at number 4, and I think the resident at number 3 also suggests that there might be overlooking from within the ground floor extension. Would that be a possibility?
I have a follow-up to that one that fits in with that. Is that all right? Sorry, I was talking about the overlooking here, Michael. I'm trying to understand what the point of having that raised window is in one part of the extension, and then having normal windows on the other part in exactly the same field of vision. And so I don't understand why they've tried to address overlooking, I assume, with that raised window and not the rest of the windows.
Right, can we hand it over to the officer for comments? Is that okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So just to first go back to the hedge which runs parallel to Back Lane, it's my understanding that the applicant rents this area of land from the estate. He has served notice on the estate to say that he's undertaken this development, but my understanding is that because that hedge is not within the red line, that hedge is still the responsibility of the estate. So that would be my answer to that question. With regards to overlooking, I think so. The raised window, Councillor Mason, that you mentioned, is that the one on the rear elevation of the 2-storey extension, the sort of high level one?
Yeah, what's the ground level one that's raised? The only reason that's there is to I assume, prevent people overlooking. I know that because I put one in my application just before Christmas, and for exactly that reason, that people can't overlook we can't overlook and they can't overlook into us. So I was just curious as to why that was there, and then the one 6 foot down or 10 foot down is not, and then obviously the one above overlooks anyway. It just seems to me, are they worried about people overlooking them to put that window in their living area? I think it's their living area. I'm trying to follow the plans. It's just, it follows on from Michael's question about the overlooking.
Yes, no, I understand. Thank you, Councillor. So I just wanted to make sure I had the right window. But my understanding is that that high level window has been put in as a high level window at ground floor level, because there is a fence immediately sort of adjacent to the what will be the rear elevation of the 2-storey section of the extension. So in order to gain light from that window, that's why they've installed one high level window in that location. In terms of the general question about the potential for overlooking here, there is an existing level of intervisibility between the application site and those neighbouring properties. It's my understanding that you could achieve views across towards the neighbouring properties already from what you can gain from the existing dwelling. I think a lot of the main concerns came around from the installation of the bifold doors, which have been angled to face directly down the rear garden of the application site. So they have been designed to look down, straight down the garden. I suppose if people stood and tried to look into the neighbouring gardens of the neighbouring properties, that could be achieved, but I don't think that would be any greater than what they could already achieve at the site.
Okay. I have Gary. Did you want to come in at this?
Sorry, Madam Chairman, might you just come back on that, please?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Thanks for that. I think patently, if just one of the photographs in the spread was that showed a view of the objective, the neighbouring properties from, I presume it's a patio or a rear garden area of the application site, that patently you can see into the garden. What I'm looking at is photographs on I don't know what page it is, but it shows you're looking across a polytunnel and a greenhouse of a neighbouring site, presumably in the allotment area at the application site, and it's a blank gable end, so that from the existing there aren't any windows to overlook into the neighbouring property and actually to within the house. I think we accept that from the back gardens one can look and see into each other each way. I think it's from within the living area into the objector's property that's the I believe, looking at the letter of objection, that's the problem, rather than simply from the back gardens. Would that be would that be right?
Chairman, I think you can look at a variety of the photographs to see what levels of intervisibility there are. I mean, clearly on the existing pair of dwellings, that's numbers, get the numbers right here for a moment, numbers, bear with me a moment, numbers 5 and 6. Obviously you have first floor windows, bedrooms predominantly, that are looking across each other's rear gardens. Yeah. And then in terms of the rear gardens of 1, 2, 3 and 4, they are almost at 90 degrees with the rear garden of this property, because it angles across the back of them. So in fact, we have a similar problem to the one we had at Wart Hill at the last meeting, where the curtilages of this property go at an angle behind the others. The ground floor extension, as has been designed, springing off the rear extension and the side wall of the gable of the property, is angled roughly 45 degrees to the existing dwellings, but straight down the garden of the application site. The application site is actually at slightly lower level than the adjoining properties. So if you can pick up from the last photographs on the presentation, actually the photos from the rear gardens of the adjacent properties at 3 and 4 are looking down and over the back garden of the application site. And certainly in the immediate rear of the site, to the rear of number 4, that hedgerow is at least 1.8 metres high from that ground level. I actually went to the site myself this morning, so had a look at that. the bifold doors are obliquely at an angle. So those ground floor opening, as I'll call it, rather than a window, would be potentially perceptible, but anybody in that room is not looking at the rear gardens of numbers 1, 2, 3 and 4. If you're in the rear garden, you would potentially be able to look at the rear gardens of numbers 1, 2, 3 and 4. But of course, that's no different to the current situation.
Thanks, Gary. I accept that there will be views as existing from back gardens, and I think that hasn't been that's not part of the objection. I think the objection is that there's a possibility that there is intervisibility. Is that the word? From the ground floor of the new application of the development on the application site. We've been presented with a drawing that shows a visibility display. I think there is I think from what everybody says, there is that possibility. I'll leave it. Thanks for that. I'll leave it for other questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Michael. Mike, Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There are a couple of things. First one, the suggestion of the AONB officer and at least one of the objectors about a hedge to be planted down that post and rail fence. I'm assuming that is quite a feasible and reasonable condition. Is that the case?
It's certainly feasible, Chairman. The side boundary of the car parking area is behind the tall hedgerow which fronts the back lane, but currently that boundary is just denoted by a low post and rail fence. So that could be planted with indigenous planting if members felt the need for an additional condition.
Okay. Yeah, right. Thank you. Yeah, I could certainly go with that one. Next thing is on page 13, among the objections, there's one that says ground levels and drainage. The parking area is on a lower land level than back lane, and there's no indication as to what materials will be used or how drainage will be managed. And I noticed there's nothing in the conditions about drainage. So the question is it assessed that the drainage of that particular plot is sufficient without any sort of condition? And in addition to that, I'm wondering, is there a possibility that at some point that parking area might get surfaced with tarmac, which would quite significantly change the drainage of it? There'd be much faster runoff of it. So is that something that the officers feel has been covered sufficiently, or does it, again, that need some sort of condition in there? Thank you.
Chairman, and subject to Ellie confirming this, the current detailing shown on the plans is for a gravelled parking finish with, just free draining surface, and it is lower front than the road, so it won't be going onto the road. The surfacing of that area with an impermeable surface, which I think is what Councillor Potter is probably concerned about, be it tarmac or whatever, would not be permitted without further planning permission under the GDO. So there is control over areas exceeding, I think it's still 5 square metres, which right. This is far in excess of that.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Gary. Councillor Thackeray.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, people are talking about overlooking, but it strikes me from looking at the plans and looking at Google Earth and the photographs supplied that most of the overlooking goes the other way. It comes from the neighbouring properties over the application garden. I think if the lie of the land is, as it said, that the application site is lower, then from looking at the photograph that's in front of me, I think if people were so interested to overlook the applicant's site, they could do so at leisure at any time of day or night. I think the objection is, in a way, a little bit overdone.
Are we in questions, Chair?
Yes, we are in questions.
Over in questions, yes. Would you like to confirm that the site is overlooked by the neighbouring properties rather than the other way around?
Well, I think when you look at the photographs, Councillor Thackeray, there clearly are a number of dwellings which are directly aligned with the rear curtilage of this garden, the way that the curtilages are, which have windows at both ground and first floor, which are aspected that way, which give views over that rear garden.
Yes, thank you. That's just what I thought. Thank you.
Ellie, Gary, can I just clarify, because we're getting quite caught up in this overlooking windows, etc. I'm looking at the plans on page 20, and it would seem to me that there is an insertion of a window in the gable end at the second story. Is that right? That would suggest that that's the study window, looking in conjunction with the plans on page 22, which is the upper level. Now, I don't know whether that's obscure glazed or not, but that certainly might give an element of overlooking. I'm satisfied that the window in the rear elevation, which is the long high level one, is actually the day room, so there would be little overlooking there by anybody. And also there seems to be a small window at ground floor level, which I think is the toilet window, which I would expect to be obscure glazed in any case. So what we're looking at is overlooking from what would be the second story study window, and maybe a glimpsed view of the bifold doors, because if they're on an angle, it will only be glimpsed, and it's a dining area, not somewhere that I would expect to be frequented a lot of the time. Is that your understanding or not?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I suppose there's the simple answer. That is my understanding. The new first floor level window that will serve the study, that is going to be obscure glazed and only top hung, and that has been conditioned as well. The applicant is aware of that, so that will be, it will be difficult to achieve views from that window across to the neighbouring properties. I don't know about the WC window. I would understand that to be obscure glazed. However, I would also say that it is the single story sort of section of the development, and therefore is sort of set down behind the hedge, the boundary hedge between those properties. In terms of what you said about the bifold doors, yes, I would agree with you that it would be very limited level of intervisibility due to the angle of them looking straight down the application site, and also the land levels and the intervening hedging and garden structures.
Thanks, Sally. Thanks for confirming that that's an obscure glazed study window, because I can't read it on the plans, it's too small. And thank you for that, because I'd expect a bathroom toilet WC window to be obscure glazed in any case. Snowy, you've got Councillor Windress.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Do we happen to know the distance between the extension and the neighbour's property? I can't find it anywhere. I've been looking.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't have that to hand, but I can check it for you.
It certainly looks quite a distance, and I don't think it's going to make a great deal of difference anyway, but just be interested to know.
I think from memory, I have measured it, and I do think from memory it was upwards of 10 metres, but I can double check the exact figure for you.
Thank you.
Okay. Can I just ask, I've got hands showing from councillors Andrews and councillors Thackeray. Oh no, councillor Thackeray's put his down. Councillor Andrews, your hand is still up. Do you have anything else you wish to ask? Thank you.
No, Chair.
Thank you. Right. Can we move now into debate, please, members, if we've finished with questions? I'll go straight to the local member, which is Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, there are a couple of, I do have some concerns about the some of the objections raised, which ordinarily this extension, if it had been on another house that hadn't been angled quite in the way it is, I don't think would create a problem. It's unfortunate in many respects that the curtilage is an odd shape in that the dog leg, as it were, goes directly behind the neighbouring properties. Just as a matter of interest, I've Googled, I've done a distance measurement on the Google, and I show just a fraction under 20 metres distance for information. I stand to be corrected if somebody had a tape measure. I do have my concerns about the angling of the ground floor extension. I accept, and Councillor Thackeray quite rightly said that the application site is lower than, fractionally lower than the objection site, but it's the inter-visibility is the problem, not one looking over the other. It's the fact that it works both ways. Ordinarily, I wouldn't have objected to this application, but there have been some salient objections with drawings that appear to show a degree of privacy loss, and I'm aware that privacy isn't all the be all and end all. I'm slightly split on this, but I'm thinking, we have to look at a material planning reason not to accept it, and I can't quite see one really. I am split. I've looked at the drawings a lot, and I've looked at the letters of objection that show some drawings showing this sort of these visibility displays. I am tempted to ask for a site visit so we can actually look at that and see it on site. I'll come back to you if I may. Can I leave that for the moment and hear what other people have to say? Sorry to be a bit wishy-washy on that.
Yes, of course. Councillor Mason, you've got your hands raised, but I'm happy to work down the list and ask members to comment. Okay, I'll work down the list. Councillor Andrews.
Well, Chairman, I find it very difficult to find a reason to refuse this, but on the other hand, I'm a bit concerned that the recommendations of the AONB manager don't seem to have been included in the recommendation, and I think that there should at least be a condition requiring a hedge at that particular fence. So if somebody else wishes to move approval, I would move an amendment to the effect that a condition be put in to enforce the AONB officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. Gary, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and totally acknowledging the point that Councillor Andrews has raised on the AONB manager's comments. Unfortunately, we didn't get the comments till late. There was a consultation before Christmas, but we didn't get a response back.
Okay, thank you for that.
After the agenda had actually been published.
Right.
So hence the late comment was the late comment before any comments had been made about additional planting. And certainly additional planting on the rear of the car parking area would screen the parking area from what we've termed the allotment. And if members were minded to require that to be planted, then we would simply add an additional condition to pick up that comment.
Okay, thank you for that, Gary. Thank you. Councillor Herp. Right, Councillor Herp, I'll come back to you when you've taken yourself off mute. No. Councillor Mackenzie, any comments?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I'm right in saying that the neighbouring property already has an extension. And from a purely planning perspective, I think we would struggle to refuse this, taking everything into account and that factor. I can't see any real planning reason to refuse it. That's just my thoughts.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Mason.
Yeah, keep on. This window's bugging me. It really is bugging me, because it was the reason given was because it had to go over the top of a fence. Now, to get more light in, but I look at the layout of the fence, and actually the one I would put the high window in would be the kitchen window, not the other one, because there's actually a view out of that fence. It just bugs me on the design, to be brutally honest, why you just wouldn't have a normal window there. And I maybe I'm cynical about the reasons why they put that in there, so people can't view into their window. That it's just bugging me why that's there, and the reason given is because there's a fence going to be close to it. Well, there's a fence. That same fence is going 6 foot behind the kitchen window as well. They haven't put that one up high. But laying the plan over the top of Google Earth and the photo, I can see there wouldn't be a fantastic amount of overlook. It's just raising a red flag for me as why that window's there. What's the motivation behind that, really?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I don't think that either this house or the extension is going to win any prizes architecturally. But as has been previously mentioned, I can't see any realistic reason for refusing it. I don't really see the overlooking as being a great problem. So on that basis, I will stick my neck out where nobody else seems to be prepared to, and I will recommend approval with the proviso that the condition about the hedge as proposed by the AONB manager be included. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Councillor Thackeray.
Yes, is it possible for me to second that?
It is, if you wish.
I'd like to second that, please, that we approve this. I have just a few questions, not questions, but comments to make about the report, which I think is fantastic and has gone to great lengths to try and explain to everybody, objectors and supporters, the rationale behind it. I don't personally see the angling of that extension, that dining area, being anything other than the logical angle of it on the site in question. To look down one's own garden, to open up one's patio doors on a bright sunny day and look down your garden, I can't think of anything nicer, frankly. Just one or two things in the report I'd like a little bit of clarification on from the officer, if possible. It says, on this basis, consider that the use of render on the single-storey side extension is acceptable in terms of design. However, a condition is proposed in order to ensure an appropriate colour and finish of render will be used. Could you please define where the subjectivity and rationale for colour exists in the planning lexicon of Ryedale District Council, or is it just if they would like to have it a Tobermory bright red or a bright blue or a bright pink or a bright yellow, Is that acceptable, or is there a colour ban of different types of colour?
Chairman, it's a judgment call, really. I speak from bitter experience of previously once having worked for the Broads Authority, where there was quite an amount of rendered property in that locality, and somebody chose to paint something day glow orange. It was visible for 5 miles away, and I think the general sort of colours of render that we find to be commonplace and used in the locality are probably whites, off-white, stone-coloured renders, reflective of stone and the colours of traditional building materials, I suppose. So that's why on other occasions, as we've done here, we've recommended seeking to not disagree with the use of render, which is obviously a different material to the brick of the main house, provided we think it's an appropriate colour. So that's the reason, Chairman. It's a judgment call.
Could I come back on that?
Can I just make a comment, Simon, before you come back on that? Having had a relative who painted their house from top to bottom in primrose yellow in a street of brick-built houses, I absolutely understand why there would be a need for an acceptable colour palette. So I think we probably need to leave it with officers. But Simon, I'm happy for you to come back on that if you wish.
Yes, I think we could take a look at Malton Marketplace and the introduction of colour to many of the buildings by the owner of Malton, and take that, even though I consider it to be insipid and pastel in its palette, we could take that as a starting point, and then have a look at Tobermory or Belle-Isle off Brittany, and yes, because this ties in perfectly to my other observation, which is the desire of the officer of the AONB that things should not be visible from anywhere. So we build houses, but we are not allowed to see them, as if we're building rabbit burrows where people scurry inside and scurry out again. I think the day, I think the day's already arrived in Ryedale where we can build exciting things, and even in a little development like this, a little splash of colour applied in the right place at the right time, with a right pop of prosecco, will be absolutely wonderful. Anyway, there you go.
Anyway, well, I'm going to leave that to officers. Councillor Cleary, your hands up.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm glad I'm not glad I was wishy-washy. I don't like being wishy-washy, but I'm glad I listened to other people's thoughts on the overlooking, and I think it has allayed my fears. It's an observation really on my dear friend Councillor Mackenzie, who makes comment on the neighbouring property that's had a two-storey extension. I'm looking on, I think I'm right in saying, maybe the officer could correct me if I'm wrong, the second and fourth picture. The fourth picture looks across the car park, the new car parking area, at what I presume is the extension that's in question. That, to my mind, looks like a late 60s extension that provided bathrooms for some of these houses. I'm thinking of other houses in the area that have very similar extensions that were to provide indoor washing facilities, if I could be as delicate as that. And I don't think necessarily that that provision should sort of make a precedent against other people's ability or inability to build an extension. It is merely an observation. I might be wrong. I'm just looking at this at the shape and location of it. It looks very similar to the ones in Thornton Clay and Foston. I think I will support this with the addition of the hedge that has been already recommended, and hopefully that will be added in as a condition. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Councillor Cleary. Members, if everyone's happy, shall we move to the vote? It has been proposed by Councillor Potter and seconded by Councillor Thackeray for approval. So may I work down the list and ask you for your decisions? Councillor Andrews.
Is that with the recommendation included?
Yes, with the addition of the condition for the hedging on the post and rail fencing at the front-facing car park area.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Andrews.
Approved, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
4.
Councillor Goodrick, 4. Councillor Hope. Councillor Hope, you're on mute.
Not in the meeting, is he? Can't see him.
Councillor Hope, you're still on mute.
I can see him, Chair.
Just stick your thumb up, Eric.
I
Or
can't,
down.
I
Thumb down,
can't
Eric.
see him, so you have an advantage.
Thumb up or thumb down, Eric?
Eric, you're off mute now.
Oh.
Right, 4.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
All right, Councillor Mackenzie.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
4.
Councillor Thackeray.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Windress.
4.
Thank you. Thank you, members. That's unanimous. That's passed, subject to the addition of the condition regarding the screen planting at the post and rail fence at the front of the property. Thank you very much. If we can move on to agenda item 8, which is application number 20011044 full. This is an application for a change of use for a part of a ground floor office space to use as a dog daycare and boarding facility, the Greengate Centre, Greengate, Malton, and I think it's Alan that's dealing with this. Thank you, Ellie, for your report. It's much appreciated.
Thank you, Chair. This item is reported to Planning Committee due to objections received from 6 local residents and also the Town Council who've raised concerns on material planning grounds. There are no updates to the report as published. The objections that have been raised relate to noise, disruption and parking and access concerns primarily. The application site itself relates to the ground floor of the Greengate Centre and also the enclosed outdoor area to the east of the building. The proposal is considered to be a small-scale home business, and the number of dogs involved are comparable to those which could be under domestic ownership, namely a maximum of 4 dogs at this boarding and daycare facility. In terms of the impact on residential amenity, the impact is very much dependent on the management of the business and business operation, details of which have been provided by the applicant in a number of statements which form part of the application submission, and the applicant is due to speak at this evening's meeting. The proposals in terms of the management that are put forward by the applicant have been secured by planning conditions as listed at the end of the report. The Environmental Health Officer has been consulted on the application and has raised no objections. The officer has advised that a condition on any licence would include any licence given under the animal welfare legislation would require the operator to conduct familiarisation sessions with new dogs and assess whether their interactions with other dogs is likely to be an issue, particularly in terms of barking, which is obviously one of the main concerns of the nearest residents. In light of this, the EHO is satisfied, subject to the controls set out in conditions and also the animal welfare licence. The conditions as listed at the end of the report would limit the use to a domestic scale and make it acceptable in land use terms, subject to animal welfare legislation. Members should note that condition 7 would tie the proposed use to the flat above. In terms of the highways impact, the site is centrally located within town. It is close to public parking areas and is very accessible on foot. The majority of dogs will be collected and dropped off on foot by owners. There will be occasions when the applicant visits customers to collect their dogs and drop them off with their own vehicle. In light of this, there are no access or parking issues anticipated with the proposed use. In conclusion, it's considered that the applicant has demonstrated that this small-scale home business can be operated from the premises without harm to residential amenity of neighbouring properties, and conditions can be imposed to limit the scale of use and restrict the use of the outdoor area. It is therefore recommended that planning permission is granted, subject to the 7 conditions as listed in the report. In addition to the report, there's a number of slides including photos of the site, which I will run through now. If Ellie, if you'd be so kind as to just move through these slides, thank you. Yeah, the first slide is an aerial photo just highlighting the application site and the building, the subject of the application. The proposed use only relates to the ground floor of that building, the first floor being the flat, the applicant's flat. As you can see, it's centrally located within Moulton. Access is gained off Green Gate to the northeast, and there's also a public right of way which follows, which runs through this rear yard to the east and south of the application site, which links to Wheelgate. So there is quite a high level of activity in this area associated with the rear of the businesses which front Wheelgate. And as you can also see on the bottom of that photo, there's the sorting office, the Royal Mail sorting office to the south, and the telephone exchange to the east. And the properties on Greengate are to the north, the terrace of properties. And you can make out on that aerial photo the rear gardens, which are parallel to the northern boundary of the application site. The site is within development limits, and it is also within the town conservation area. Ellie, if you could move on to the next slide, please. So this photo is taken facing south from Paul's Row. So this is facing the front of the terrace of dwellings on Greengate. So these are the properties, a number of which they all have back gardens on the other side, and a number have raised concerns with the proposed use. You can actually make out the roof of the building, the subject of the application, in the background on the right hand side. You can just see the tiled roof. Can you move on to the next slide, please, Ellie? Yeah, so this is taken from within the yard. So on the right hand side of that photo is the eastern elevation of the Greengate Centre, and you can just make out the entrance to the building above the railings. So this is a shared yard. There is access on foot and by vehicle, and private parking in this area. The applicant does have access to one parking space in this area. Just move on to the next slide, please, Ellie. So just panning around, you can see the relationship of the application site to the rear of the dwellings on Greengate. On the right hand side of that photo, you can also see the boundary treatment of the outdoor area, the exercise area. So it's a substantial boundary treatment on the southern and eastern sides, and on the northern side, as you'll see, if you could just move on to the next photos, please, Ellie. You can just see through the railings on the northern side is the boundary timber fence along the northern boundary. So if you can just run through the next couple of slides. Yep. So just panning around along the northern boundary of the site, just showing the relationship with the residents to the north and the backs of their houses. And then the next slide, please, Ellie. This is just facing back towards the access off Greengate to the northeast of the site. Next slide, please. So these are taken from within the ground floor of the Greengate Centre. So this is the area that would be fitted out with kennels to allow for the boarding and the dog care in this area. And next slide, please, Ellie. Again, this is within the same room. This is the largest room on the ground floor, the main room that would be used for the boarding, facing back towards the entrance. On the next slide, please. And this is currently a kitchen area. Again, this would form part of the change of use, fitted out to comply with animal welfare legislation. And next slide, please. And this is facing back towards the entrance in the eastern elevation of the building. Next slide, please. And outside, just to show the outdoor area, this is facing east. And on the left-hand side, you can see the boundary treatment, which is a secure boundary in terms of keeping dogs within this area. And the applicant has confirmed that there would be a maximum of 4 dogs at any one time, and any use of the outside area would be supervised at all times. So the next photo, please, Ellie, is just panning around, just showing a close-up of that boundary and the rear gardens. And the next slide, please. Again, just moving along that boundary just to show it's quite substantial boundary treatment. And next slide, if there is one. No. So that concludes the presentation. Thank you, Chair. It might be worthwhile, Ellie, if you could just go back to the aerial photo, and that might be helpful for members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan. I will open it up to questions from members, please. Councillor Mason.
Yeah, one question. Who owns the fence at the back of the gardens running down? I look at that fence and see it's a very thin, I can't remember the type of fence it's called, but they're quite thin. And if there's dogs in one side of the garden to the other side of the garden, knowing some of the breeds of dogs that possibly could be around in Norton, you could quite easily see that fence going through. I just wondered who owned that fence and who would be responsible for the damage to that fence, and also the house at the bottom, the windows, will they be opening onto the exercise area?
Thank you, Councillor Mason. I believe the applicant is actually registered to speak, so if they would be able to confirm, but the fence is owned by the applicant and has been recently erected by the applicant. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Sorry, yeah, we do have a speaker. Forgive me, my apologies. Louise Arundel. Mrs. Arundel, are you available to speak?
Hello, yeah, go on.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, you've got 3 minutes, Mrs. Arundel.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors and Madam Chairman, for considering my application. We've taken on board the objections from the local residents and town council, and I note that there's 3 main points of concern, which are a misunderstanding that we intend to erect kennels in the garden, noise, and increase of vehicle movement. Firstly, the intention is to provide home-from-home boarding for dogs, which are not kennels, and daycare facilities for a maximum of 4 dogs. Therefore, small scale on the same basis as normal pet ownership. Regarding the noise, I ran a boarding and daycare business from my previous premises in Leeds. It was a small mid-terrace house and was licensed by the City Council for a maximum of 3 dogs. There were no complaints from neighbours at all regarding noise at any time. Secondly, noise will be kept to a minimum in any event. Dogs will never be unsupervised in the garden, and most, if not all, dogs I have in daycare will be those that I already walk and are already familiar with me. Thirdly, we don't anticipate an increase of vehicle movement, as dogs will be either collected by myself or dropped off on foot by owners parking on Greengate. Just in relation to what we're commenting on about the fence, it's actually us who own the fence there. Thank you for listening, and that's all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Sorry, I'll reopen it back up for questions. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, notwithstanding what's been said and what's in the report, my only real concern about this application is the possibility of noise. And Alan did say that that would be dealt with under the conditions, but having scanned through the conditions, I can't say anything specifically that if there were to be a problem with noise, where would or which condition could it be handled under, as in, you know, the sort of breaches of conditions?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Potter. Yes, that is correct. There isn't a specific noise-related condition that has arisen from consultation with the EHO. I think in terms of the environmental health officer's position, they're satisfied in terms of the scale of the use and the number of dogs involved and controls of the indoor areas that wouldn't be any likely unacceptable impact on the community. So if there were to be issues in terms of noise disturbance, it would be under the Environmental Protection Act as a statutory noise nuisance. That's where any complaint would be dealt with.
Right, thanks for that, Alan. Yeah, I had seen that the applicant had tested it and it was sort of thick walls and there wasn't a problem. And bearing in mind that the environmental health officer is happy with this, then yeah, I'm satisfied with that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Potter. I've got two people with their hands raised. We are in questions, can I just remind you? Can I go to Councillor Andrews?
Yes, Chair. My question relates to fouling. Now, dogs, when I mean the gardens of houses generally can become, if you're not careful, dog toilets. Could we have some indication, please, as to how the officers will ensure, will see that it will be made absolutely compulsory that the owner regularly clears the garden of all dog feces that may be left in the garden after the dogs have been left out, because I'm sure this is one of the things that is concerning local residents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Yes, this is something that has been picked up by the applicant in their explanation of how the use would be managed. We don't believe it necessary to include a specific condition. The applicant, it is their property, it is part of the business, so it will be their responsibility to clean up any dog waste and dispose of it appropriately, as summarised within the report. Any fouling in the area outside of the application site is beyond planning control and is responsibility of individual dog owners. So we are satisfied with what the applicant has explained in terms of how that particular aspect of the operation will be managed.
Chair, just to come on with that, is it possible to impose a condition simply requiring them to remove all dog feces regularly? I mean, it's only everything else is covered. It's just this which hasn't been covered, and I can quite understand the concerns of local residents about this. Thank you, Chair.
I think in terms of a specific condition, it's from an officer's point of view, it's not deemed necessary to make the development acceptable, given that it is a management matter and it is within the applicant's interest to manage it in a way that ensures that any dog fouling is cleaned up promptly. Obviously, they are obviously offering this to customers, so it's, as I say, it's within their interest.
Chair, my question was, is it possible to impose such a condition? Thank you.
It is possible, but whether it would meet the tests, I'm unsure. Like I say, from an officer point of view, it's not necessary. One of the tests is whether it's necessary to make the development acceptable. I don't believe it meets that test in this case.
Thank you, Alan. Councillor Thackeray.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to refer members back to, I think, one of the first committees that I sat on, actually, where we considered an application for a dog grooming parlour in Norton called Tilly's Tail. And there was an element of concern there about noise and odour and whatever. Principally noise, I think, from neighbouring properties. And my question would be, sorry, I'll just to extrapolate. We approved that application on the basis that we would give permission for a trial period, which was, if you like, a period of probation to make sure that it all worked out and that people didn't get upset and so on and so forth. Subsequently, actually, in October, I think it expired October 2020, and so late last year, that condition was removed, and it's now, well, given the COVID pandemic, but it's now a permanent dog grooming parlour. So I wondered if that might be an approach to this situation also. Thank you. That's my question.
Thank you, Councillor Thackeray. Yes, as you say, the temporary trial run condition is a valid condition that can be used. In this case, after discussions with the environmental health officer, it wasn't considered appropriate in this case. But yes, it is a matter that could be considered by members if they deem it necessary.
Right, thank you very much. If there are no further questions, I'll move the item into debate, and the local member is Councillor Andrews. So we'll go to Councillor Andrews first.
Yes, Chair. Can I say, my first point is that I can understand the concerns of the local people there. I do appreciate their concern, and I think if I was living in those houses, I'd probably have exactly the same concerns. And I do appreciate the officers have taken and have made an enormous effort to overcome all the objections. I think 4 dogs inside and not kept outside, and controlled when they're supervised when they're outside is an excellent arrangement. And I can't see I can't see a problem with that, provided it's properly monitored and there are arrangements for monitoring. However, I'm not satisfied with the arrangements to deal with dog waste. Now, I'm sure the applicant is an ideal person to deal with dog waste, to remove dog waste, and so on. But the applicant could quite easily, at some time in the future, sell on to somebody else who might not be quite so scrupulous. And so I do think it is necessary to have a condition on the site requiring the applicant to remove to regularly remove, to the satisfaction of the local authority, all dog waste on a regular basis. I'm told that it is possible to have a condition, but the officers don't think it's necessary to make the planning permission acceptable. Well, that of course is a matter of opinion for this committee, and I think that this committee is entitled to take the opinion that we can have such a condition imposed. And so therefore, Chair, I would propose this application for approval, subject to a condition along the lines of which I've just indicated. If that is not acceptable, Chair, if the committee will not be supporting of that, I shall be voting against this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Can I ask officers what their view on the reasonableness of that condition is, please? I know, Alan, you've already stated you don't think it's necessary, but is it a reasonable condition? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just, notwithstanding the point raised by Councillor Andrews, I just wanted to clarify that in terms of how this is operated in relation to the flat. There is a condition number 7. So it was mentioned about possibly being sold off or separated. The fact that the applicant is living in the flat above, and this is the ground floor use, and that is tied via condition 7. Again, that reiterates that it is in their interest to keep that area, which also doubles as their garden, in a clean area. But yes, it is possible to add.
Chair, this was not the point I was making. The point that I was making is that if the property is sold, and I'm not talking about selling the ground floor separately, I'm talking about if the whole property is sold, then the permission goes with the property. So I'm not. The issue that I am concerned with is not covered by the officer's answer. Thank you, Chair.
I was aware of that, Paul. I'd already picked that up. Alan, would you like to come back? And Gary's raised his hands as well.
Chairman, I think Alan sort of set out what the issues relating to conditions is in terms of the test we need to apply, and they're set out in the planning policy guidance. And there are a variety of tests and conditions. The sort of acid test ones is a condition necessary, reasonable, enforceable. They tend to be the main tests that we deal with. But at the end of the day, Councillor Andrews is correct in the sense that there is a degree of judgment in making those decisions. What I would say is that, when we impose conditions, we need to be cognizant of that fact, because a condition can be appealed like a refusal of a planning permission can be appealed. And we've had many appeals against conditions over the years, and sometimes they're harder to deal with than refusals. But there is a judgment call there. I think the issue we also have here is that there is a degree of control via our environmental health officers as well. And we shouldn't be using planning controls to replicate other controls where they're available to us. So Councillor Andrews is right. You have a judgment to make as a planning committee tonight. The officer judgment is that this condition isn't necessary, but that's something for members to adjudicate on.
Thank you for that, Gary. Councillor Mason, you've got your hands raised.
I think Gary's just answered my question actually about, do we not have environmental health for this issue rather than planning?
Okay, thank you for that. Right. Sorry, I've turned myself off. I'm going to work down the list and ask members for debate. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I'm going to agree with Councillor Andrews on this, and I realise that it might not be necessary to impose a condition, but the applicant themselves have actually already volunteered as part of the management plan, and they've actually given the wording that we need. In terms of waste management, the applicant has confirmed that all animal waste will be collected in sealed heavy-duty, etc. each day. It's even given us the timing rather than regularly. I would like to back it up with every day. Regularly could be once a year. It'd still be regular. It wouldn't be good enough. So I think, as the applicant has already volunteered in terms of the application, how it's going to be dealt with, I think it's something that we should accept as part of the plan, and say yes, it is part of the plan, and that's going to be a condition of the acceptance of the application. So I will second it, provided that waste management plan that the applicant's already volunteered becomes a condition. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. Councillor Hope.
Yes, Chairman. Yes, bit of reservations, but I'll go along with the for this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hope. Councillor Mackenzie.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think due to the interest that I declared, I would rather not take part in this debate.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Mason.
I don't see any real problems with this application, really, apart from personal recommendation to put a slightly stronger fence on in case they get some strong dogs in that garden. That'll be my only really recommendation, but I don't see an issue with it really. I don't see because the dog waste is already in the application, I don't see the need, but I'll support either way. It doesn't really make a lot of difference really. It's already in the application anyway.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Mason. Councillor Potter.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Believe it or not, I've got nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Thackeray.
Ditto.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Windress.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have no problem with this application at all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, members. I have to say, given that the applicant has already made a provision within the application to say that dog waste will be cleared on a daily basis and disposed of in an appropriate manner, I'm happy to support the members' request to actually make it a condition of the application. But what I will say is this: if it's a responsible business owner, the last thing she'll want is a load of dog mess where her customers are coming in and out. So it's in her interest to do this, to keep it clean and tidy. And she also has to live there. And I would like to think there will be times when she wants to use this space for her own enjoyment. And you won't get much enjoyment if it's covered in dog mess. So it's been moved and seconded for approval. It's moved by Councillor Andrews and seconded by Councillor Cleary, subject to the condition with regard to the removal of dog waste on a daily basis. If officers are happy with that, and I'd like them to confirm, please, then I will go to the vote.
Chairman, if that's what members wish to vote on, then that's fine.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to the vote. Councillor Andrews.
Approved, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Goodrick, myself, for. Councillor Hope.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie, do you wish not to take part in the vote?
I do, thank you. Yes.
Thank you. So is that an abstention, John?
Yes, that's abstention.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mason.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Thackeray.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Windress.
For.
Thank you, members. That is 8 votes for and 1 abstention. So it's carried, subject to the condition, etc. Thank you very much, members. On your pages, you will see a list of delegated decisions from pages, I think it's 44 to 48. And also there is a planning appeal decision. Gary, do you want to make any comment on this appeal?
Actually, Chairman, it was, I think, our first virtual informal hearing. I say that because I think Alan actually attended the hearing on behalf of the council. As you'll see, it was for a temporary agricultural workers dwelling on a site outside of Weaverthorpe, and it was a site which members may well recall for free-range egg production buildings up on the walls to the south of the village. And we've had a couple of applications for 2 very large free-range egg production units. When we dealt with this application, there was only the one on site in operation. And I think by the time we'd actually got down to dealing with it, we were almost at the point where the second one was ready as well, which sort of added to the argument for the need for the mobile home on the site to assist with the running of the unit. I think that probably is the summation of the case, isn't it, Alan? But the inspector weighed it up and on balance felt there was an argument for living on the site rather than just a few minutes away on the edge of the village.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no other business except to say that I will declare the meeting closed and thank everybody for their attendance. So thank you very much, everybody. And thanks, Gary.
Thank you,
thanks,
Chairman.
officers.
Thank you,
everybody. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Good night.
Michael.